Hello everyone and welcome to Janet's Craft Corner. I'm Janet and today we're going to be painting a cute Hello Easter gnome door hanger. So first of all, let's talk about our colors. These are all listed in the description with the actual colors they are. We have a white, we have a kind of skin tone beige, we have a nice pretty green, a heather purple, and a pretty coral. So this is pretty simple as far as the colors go. Okay, I have already, and I guess I should have said we have this brown too, because I have already used it to do the faux stain on my background. I've also already taken and put my pieces all out on a tape board. If you haven't seen how to make my tape boards, then there's several videos that show that. Check one of them out. But this one, this section is all white. This section is, these are kind of that coral color, and this is striped. These two, this is the lavender, this is the green, and this is the skin tone. And then this piece is white, and this piece is lavender. So we're going to start, we're going to get our back out of the way here, and we're going to start by doing the white on this piece. This is a piece that to me is a little bit of a challenge because it's kind of halfway between the area where you know for sure you want to use a brush, or maybe you should use the sponges. I'm going to go with the brush, even though we've got lots of little edges. I think I can paint it with the brush without getting off on all my edges. We'll see how successful I am, but I think that's probably the easiest way, is to use the brush and just very carefully come through all these edges. I'm not sure what my idea is here, but I actually realized I shouldn't have started on this edge because I'm going to end up with my hand across it while I'm trying to paint, and I'm going to have wet paint in areas where my hand's trying to lay. So this wasn't the best place to have started on it, so I'm going to adjust here as I go. Finish this little area right here, but I'm going to adjust to be on the other side. Okay, so we're going to go over here and start. As I'm going through this, I'm using my brush to go over some sections multiple times. I'm trying hard to get it so I don't have any directional brush stroke on this as the two pieces cross. I don't want it to be prominent as to which one's up and which one's down, because then I have to remember which sides are up and which sides are down, and it's easier just to not have it show which one is up or down. So I just very carefully work through and make sure I keep going back and forth until I don't have a true stroke there that you can use to tell which piece is on top. Plus, as I'm going back over it, I'm doing a really, really light coat, but then I keep going back over what I've already done. And that gives me the opportunity to keep from having to do a second coat, or at least to keep that second coat very light, because I've gotten a good coat on the first one. Acrylic dries so quick that you can come back, as I'm doing, over it within just a minute or two, actually a few seconds, and get that section redone, or get a second coat on a section. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm just working my way back across these sections as I go and getting a second coat on them, and even probably third coats on some areas. I'm kind of just looking, where do I have light spots, so that I get a decent set of coverage out of this first coat. And if I decide to do a second coat, it will just be minor coverage, just kind of touch up, give it a even tone all the way across, but it won't be a major deal. I will have all the light spots, I guess is the best term for them, covered clearly, so that I have an even coating all the way around. And I am turning it slightly as I go to make my hand go in the right direction so I don't have to twist my hand around as much. You can do it whichever way you want, twist your hand around or twist your piece. It's a matter of what's more convenient for you. I can't twist my hands very well anymore. As I've grown older, that's become more and more difficult, especially with the fibromyalgia. So I just turn the piece, do a lot of turning of the piece. Sometimes you get into a corner that you didn't intend to get into, but that's one of the things you can do is, like I'm doing here, before it dries, clean it off with a clean brush. And that way you'll not have that hump and edge there that's white. And as I'm looking at this, I can pretty much tell you I'm going to definitely need to do a second coat. I can't see that not happening at this point. It's not unusual. White is a hard one to get to do in a single coat, even when going back over it like I've been doing as I went across here. It's just still a little splotchy, and it's just really hard to get a good clean single coat. So we'll let it dry and come back in a little bit and put a second coat on it. So now I'm going to use my brush on most of the pieces that I have up here that need white, except for this hello, and I'm going to actually use the sponge technique on that because there's no way I keep from getting my edges with the brush. The rest of these pieces are large enough that I shouldn't end up off my edges too bad. If you end up off your edges, you can always touch it up with black paint or a black acrylic marker. I usually use a Thule marker to touch mine up. It seems to me a marker is a little easier than a brush, although there are some little areas that a marker won't get into and a brush will. So sometimes I will actually use both the marker and the brush to clean up my edges. And remember, it's a homemade product, so your edges don't have to be perfect. This is not like you're selling it in mass production or anything. This is for your home, so you decide whether you're comfortable with what your edges look like at the time that you're looking at them. And this piece, it's just the outer edges that are going to end up showing, because we're going to put in the centers into the ears, and then across this piece there's another piece that comes up on top of it. So I'm just painting the ears. I'm not trying to just paint the outside edge. I'm painting the full ear, but I'm not painting across that bottom piece because I know it's going to be covered by another piece. And on the ears, the biggest reason I'm not just painting the edges is because you never know that you may not get your piece perfectly centered this way. It's not that big a deal. And then on this piece, we just need his beard. His hat needs to be whatever color we're going to paint his hat. I think we're painting it stripes with maybe the green and the purple, maybe all three. I don't know. We'll see. See what my mood is when the time comes. But it's not going to be white. So we're just painting our beard. We just want to make sure we go up far enough that we're underneath that piece. It goes across here, which is this piece actually, so that we don't have any brown edge showing, unfinished edge showing. And you'll notice I'm working from the center out so that I don't have my edge, so my edges stay as neat as possible. It's harder when you get down into this tip because it's hard to be both coming off the edge over there and coming off the edge over here, although it can be done. I am going to come back and do another coat on all of these, I'm sure. You can decide how thick you want your coats to be, whether you want it to be perfectly white or you want it to have some streaks in it. So that's something that's totally up to you. And then for this hello, I'm going to use the sponge technique because it's so thin that the brush is just not going to be realistically possible. And I'm using the sponge that I'm using is just a little 1/4 of a sponge piece. I've actually already used one end of it. I'm using the other end. And you're going to keep it as unloaded with paint as possible so that you've got very little paint on there, and you're going to use very little pressure. The more pressure you use, the more of an edge you're going to get. So, you know, I know it takes a little longer when you do it without using much pressure, and I get impatient, start increasing my pressure. So I have to remind myself, keep the pressure light, keep the pressure light. But you'll get less of an edge if your pressure is really, really light. So it's better to have really light pressure and go back and knead 2 or 3 rounds than to have that edge, that painted edge piece, because you want it to look as clean as possible along those edges. And that's why we use this method, is because if we tried to use a brush, we would end up with it all over our edges and down in, especially down in these loops. I mean, there's no way we wouldn't have paint clumped down in there. And this way, we don't. So this is a nice way to do that. You know what? Sometimes if you let things dry, you realize that you hadn't done as bad a job as you thought you'd done on them. They were just still wet in areas. Looking at the lattice work here off to the side, and actually I don't think it needs another coat. So we're going to skip that. So I did do a good job of going back and forth. I really don't see any areas that need another coat. This hello is definitely going to need another coat even after this one. I'm just coming back across the second time, but it's still going to need another coat because I am keeping it very, very light. And I think all of these pieces can use it. They're not bad to get by with just one coat, especially if you want his beard to look stripy, kind of streaky. But I'd rather do a second coat. And on this one, make sure you get your brush strokes going the way you want them to go if they show. You hope they don't end up showing. You hope that you've got a thick enough layer on there that they don't really end up showing. But make sure that you're not going, you know, in a direction you don't want a brush stroke. Because like in this case, you want the brush strokes to come out, not up and down, but kind of out. Show like where the hair's growing out in that directions. Up on the ears, yeah, it doesn't really matter because you're hoping you don't get any brush strokes, because you really want those to be a thin, a nice sharp coat. But they're small enough that you usually will get a very sharp coat. And the chances are pretty good you'll get it on the other pieces, but just if you are careful with what direction your brush is going in, then if you don't get perfection and you've got some brush marks, if you don't get it so that you have none, it's not a big deal. It actually adds character, not distracts. So that's what I'm trying to say, I guess. I'll tell you, sometimes you don't have to use acrylic paint. You can spray paint some of these pieces, like the lattice work. A lot of times I would have spray painted that tape, except that it's winter time right now, and so I can't really take it out and spray paint it. But in the summer, and in the spring, fall, and summer, when I can go outside and actually do that, I would have spray painted that. I would have taken it out and just spray painted it, because it would have gotten a nicer, not necessarily nicer, a more even coat on it, and I wouldn't have had to worry about going back and keep going back over my brush strokes. So remember, you've got options on how you paint these, and remember that you can paint them any color you want. While I'm using these colors, it's kind of the colors I decided to go with today. that you can use any color you want. So don't let this be a limitation. And then we need to do another coat here. Okay, so that's that color. So now the lavender, we've got this large area, and then we just have this one little thing, as well as, I think we're doing part of our egg, but probably will be a lavender. So we have, this is lavender, and I'm thinking a couple, maybe a couple of stripes. Yeah, I think so. I think we'll do a couple of stripes. Okay, so let's get our lavender out. First thing we're going to do is do this board. And this intricate work here, I'm going to use a sponge on. Because if I don't, I'm going to end up with all those holes filled in. And that's what a sponge is really good for that. So we're just going to use the sponge to do this edge along here. I'm not going to try to go very far down with the sponge because it takes longer to paint with the sponge than it does with a brush. But this will keep my holes, my cut work showing and not clogged up. Whereas if I am not careful, I will end up with globs of paint down in those circles, in those cuts, and that will not be something we want. So we're going to do, we did that edge with the sponge, and I went across it 2 or 3 times to try to get it the color I want. If I need to, I can come back. And then now I'm going to do the rest of the piece with the brush because it's a lot faster. And we just go up along that edge and get overlap a little bit, and we'll be fine. You won't be able to tell the difference. If you can, I'll use a little bit more of the sponge. I'm using a 1-inch brush on this. I could have used a smaller brush to save later, so I can use a smaller brush on this, but you can't use the larger brush on some of the other stuff. But I decided that I'll just use 2 brushes because I just want to get this painted in a quick fashion. And again, I'm painting off the edge of my board. I'm coming from the middle off the edge. And the hello that is engraved on there is only for placement. So you just need to be able to see the edges of it, not really very much of it. So don't worry about making sure that can show about, whether your brush covers it or not. It's okay. Okie doke. I think we got most of that. Just in case we need to come back and touch that up, I'm going to leave this brush out until I finish my lavender. So I can come back and look at this and see. I think I'm going to need to sponge across there again, but I don't think I'm going to need to brush. So we're going to set it aside and see what we end up with here in a minute. And then let's see. This piece is lavender. We know that for sure. And then I'm going to have to get a smaller brush because I'm going to be doing stripes. Most of our kits come so that you don't have to do a lot of striping, a lot of painting within a line or within an area. But unfortunately, you do have to some, because if you don't, you can't, there's not any options for what to do. So we're going to have to paint along this edge, and we're just going to use a really thin flat brush, small flat brush. You want it to be narrower than the stripe you're painting. Which sometimes is hard. And then I think I'll do all 3 colors on my stripes. So 1, 2, and we'll do this. And then on my egg, I think I'll do a couple of, I think I'll do the middle stripes in the purple. Well, I need to be careful of going across the stripe this direction. I do not need to be careful on the ends because the hands piece goes on top. It's not, you don't paint it in. So I need to worry about these stripes across the middle. These stripes are really, really thin, so I'm having to use my brush sideways, which is why I had trouble down there, rather than draw it all the way across on the piece, I'm having to kind of go along the edge sideways. And the stripes are definitely going to need 2 coats because I was keeping my hand very, very steady and very light during them. And I am looking at my large piece besides a couple of pieces that are kind of globby. And I was tempted there to try to touch up. There's just this one area right here. It's a little touch up. But I'm really pleased with the coat, so I don't need to add any extra coats to that, so we can get all of our brushes clean from this, and we will go on to our next color. Okay, next I'm going to do the skin tone, and that's just the nose and the 2 little hands. That's a quick and easy one, so I'm going to kind of just knock it out here. Hate it when you get the little hardened area on the paint every time you open it, seems like, even though I use my paints almost every day. These are just a real simple paint job. This is not my favorite color for this. I have a color I love, tawny. It's called Tawny Light with Ceram Coat, but unfortunately it is really hard to find. So we're making do with, I think this is Rosy Beige, maybe? Yeah, Rosy Beige. Which is close, just not quite not quite the perfect color, you know? Hate it when you find a color and then they quit carrying it. I don't know, they think I'll buy more if they change up the colors, I don't know. But I think I buy less because of that, because I make it last as long as I possibly can, because I really don't want to go to the next one. You know, you've got 2 choices when you paint. You can paint it really on pretty thick and you'll definitely get by with a single coat, or you can do like I do usually and paint it pretty light but come by with I guess it's a second coat. It's not really a full second coat before you quit with that color even. So I'm not even going to another color and coming back to do a second coat. I'm just giving it a little touch before I quit, because even things out just a little bit. And with acrylic, you know, it dries quick enough that you can get that, you can come back and get that second coat within just a few seconds, so you don't have to wait on things forever to get them dry. But you do want to let them dry a little bit or you'll start getting streaks. Okay, I think that's good enough for that. Okay, so then we're going to do, let's do our kind of our corally color, and I'm going to actually use this for the ears rather than a pink, just because I think if I put a pink and the coral both on there, it'll kind of clash, and I don't want to do that. And then I'm going to use it in the stripes on both his hat and the egg, I think. Okay, so again, we're going to use one of those small, thin brushes. I don't even know what the number or size on this brush is, if I see one. I think it's about a 6, probably. That one has a label on it. This one doesn't, but they're about the same size. So it's probably about a 6. So is the one I'm using. And I'll be honest, this and a 1-inch are my 2 favorite sizes, and so I bought a package of real cheap ones. I go through them pretty rapidly, whether they're cheap or expensive, so I don't do a lot of the expensive stuff. I have a set of the expensive ones and I use them for the specialty stuff, but for this, where I go through so many of them, I don't try to buy a pack of them more expensive ones. This is going on really, really light, so it's definitely going to need 2 coats. But that's okay. We'll come back and get the second coat. Again, we can probably do, by the time we get done doing all these little stripy areas, we'll be able to come back and do another coat over there. And then we'll be able to come back and do all these stripes. So it dries quick enough, acrylics dry quick enough that you usually don't have to wait, unless you're doing big, large areas. You usually don't have to wait to come back and get the, by the time you get through the pieces that you're going to use that color for. it's usually dried enough that you can come back and get. Because that's the one that's most important probably, and I can decide where I want to go. I think I want the coral there, so we're going to go with the coral there. And then we'll just have the single stripe of the green. And I know that I'm going to have this piece coming up across the top here, so I just need to make sure I get down far enough that it goes in behind there. And I'm also going to have, that's going to make his ears come up there, and I think they're going to cover up that area pretty well too. So now I'm just going to go back and do redo all of my areas that I just did for a second coat to give me some, make my color darker. That the brown showed from the wood showed through a lot. The color's so much duller, I guess, although it matches that a little better than it did on the palette. And you got those kind of colors that do that. If you don't want them to do that, you can always paint a coat of white before you start, kind of a primer coat before you start painting. If you really are wanting to keep the brightness of whatever color you're doing, you don't want to lose any of that color, and it's a semi-opaque. But I'm not unhappy with what this color's turning out to be. And this is very unusual, but I think I'm actually going to go do a third coat on this. Not 100% pleased with the way that's covering. It's actually covering better right here than it covered anywhere else. It's funny because it's just, this is no different than anywhere else. I must be putting more pressure on my brush or something. Something is making this work a little better than it did down in there. And then our final color today is our green. And we're going to do a couple of stripes, and then our Easter is green. That's what, or at least that's what I think I'm doing mine. And I'm going to use the sponge technique on that. I'm getting much better at not using gobs and gobs of paint. I usually get big old pull. And see, when I know I'm doing a big area, I still am bad about getting too much. We'll do our stripe on our hat, and we have a center stripe there on our egg. I think we'll do in this color. If you have trouble doing the stripes, you can use painter's tape and tape off stripes to do each one clearly. But I find it's a lot, to me, that's a lot of extra work, and you don't get much better result. But if you have trouble doing them, that's a way to do them. You still have trouble, then I would say choose products that don't have the striping in them. And there's a lot of them that don't. The striping is not a normal piece. Okay, I'm going to tear this piece off a little bit, because it's kind of in my way there. So we'll tear it all off, tuck it under, and then get rid of this. Okay, so then this we're going to use the sponge method on it. I felt like it was too close to the white there is why I pulled that off. And we'll do this, and now then we won't have to worry about our sponge getting on our white. And so again, light touch keeps our edges clean. So, you know, offload as much of the paint as you can. You want a very light amount of paint on it, and you want a very light touch to what you're doing. And I then just went back over areas, kind of a second coat, although I'm not really giving it a second coat. I'm just hitting areas where I had it really, really light. But just kind of look at it and see where your wood is showing through, and then just touch up those areas. It's, you know, simple to just touch back through. And as quickly as it dries, especially when you're doing with the sponge painting, you're doing this really, really, really thin layer. It dries within, you know, like by the time I got the A done, the E was dry. So you can go back and touch pretty easily without any trouble. You do want to make sure that it's mostly dry before you go back and touch on it, or you'll actually be pulling paint off rather than putting paint on. Okay, so I think that's everything we need to paint, and we'll do another coat up here just to be on the safe side. I think it's fine, but I think we'll go ahead and do a second one. Yeah, and it's always up to you whether you do a second coat or not, especially on acrylic paints, because they usually will cover in one. It's just a matter of, did you get a good even coat or not? And a lot of times I don't when I do my first one, because I just can't see where the lines are going, I guess. I don't know what the problem is, but a lot of times I don't when I do my first coat. So I just come back and do a light second coat to even up my application, basically. Okay, so we're going to pull all of our pieces off of our tape so that we've got them all out here and ready to assemble. Sometimes I will trim up my edges, but I'm looking at these and I don't see a whole lot of need, so I'm going to do a lot of that this time. I might touch it up after I get everything assembled. Okay, so we'll get our piece back out here, and we're going to start at the bottom basically and build up. So we're going to put our lattice work on and make sure we line our edges up on that, and then our stripe down the middle, our hello, and the Easter. That part's easy. Then we're going to build our little gnome over here. Let's put him kind of at an angle. Okie doke. So first of all, we're going to put this on and our mustache. Actually, we're going to put our ears piece on and our mustache, and then this piece on, and then our nose is going to go there, and our centers to our ears are going to go here, and then our little egg that he's actually holding down here, and his hands. And there we go. All we need to do now is add a little bit of twine, and it's ready to hang. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe.